West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
A This Week exclusive. Chief Washington correspondent and co-anchor Jonathan Karl sat down with committee vice chair Liz Cheney for her first interview since the hearings began. John pressed her about those extraordinary allegations and whether the committee is making the case to prosecute former President Trump.
You've been cleared since really January 6th itself that he bears responsibility. Have these hearings demonstrated that Donald Trump needs to be prosecuted?
Ultimately, the Justice Department will decide that. I think we may well, as a committee, have a view on that. And if you just think about it from the perspective of what kind of man knows that a mob is armed and sends the mob to attack the Capitol, and further incites that mob when his own vice president is under threat, when the Congress is under threat. It's very chilling. And I think certainly we will, continue to present to the American people what we found.
So the committee will or will not make a criminal referral?
We'll make a decision as a committee about it.
So it's possible there will be a criminal referral, which
yes.
would be effectively the committee saying that he should be prosecuted, and this is the evidence that we've uncovered.
The Justice Department doesn't have to wait for the committee to make a criminal referral. And there could be more than one criminal referral.
Are you worried about what that means for the country to see a former president prosecuted, a former president who is a likely candidate, who may in fact be running for president against Biden? It would be Biden's Justice Department that would be prosecuting.
I have greater concern about what it would mean if people weren't held accountable for what's happened here. I think it's a much graver constitutional threat if a president can engage in these kinds of activities and the majority of the president's party looks away, or we as a country decide we're not actually going to take our constitutional obligations seriously. I think that's a much more serious threat.
Cassidy Hutchinson, I saw you went and gave her a hug after she testified.
It was unpatriotic. It was un-American. We were watching the Capitol building get defaced over a lie.
Why did she go where so few have gone before?
What Cassidy Hutchinson did was an unbelievable example of bravery and of courage and patriotism in the face of real pressure.
The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel.
People have outright said that she's not telling the truth, that Cassidy Hutchinson's not telling the truth about what happened in the presidential motorcade.
the committee is not going to stand by and watch her character be assassinated by anonymous sources and by men who are claiming executive privilege. And so we look forward very much to additional testimony under oath on a whole range of issues.
Do you have any evidence other than Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony to corroborate what she said happened in that presidential motorcade?
The committee has significant evidence about a whole range of issues, including the president's intense anger. And I think
anger at not being allowed to go to the Capitol.
Yes, exactly. At that moment.
Yeah.
And so, but let me just leave it there. I think you will continue to see in coming days and weeks additional detail about the president's activities and behavior on that day.
So you told me last year, this is a direct quote, "I will do everything I can
to make sure he's not the nominee, and everything necessary to make sure that he never gets anywhere close to the Oval Office again."
Have these hearings gotten you closer to that goal, making him toxic and not a viable candidate?
That's not the goal of the hearings.
But you said it was your priority.
I think it's important, but I don't want you to convey the impression that somehow the hearings are political.
Yeah.
Because the goal of the hearings is to make sure that the American people understand what happened, to help inform legislative changes that we might need to make. But I think it's also the case that there's not a single thing that I have learned as we have been involved in this investigation that has made me less concerned. And I think there's no question. I mean, a man as dangerous as Donald Trump can absolutely never be anywhere near the Oval Office ever again.
You said recently the country is now in a battle we must win against a former president trying to unravel our constitutional republic. What will it mean for that battle if you lose the Republican primary in Wyoming?
Well, I don't intend to lose the Republican primary in Wyoming.
How important is it that you win for that larger battle?
Well, I think it's important because I will be the best representative of the people of Wyoming can have. The single most important thing is protecting the nation from Donald Trump. And I think that matters to us as Americans more than anything else. And that's why my work on the committee is so important, and why it's so important to not just brush this past. I think it's very important that people know the truth and that there are consequences.
Can the Republican Party survive in the way you've known it if Donald Trump is again chosen?
It can't survive if he's our nominee.
No.
I think that he can't be the party nominee, and I don't think the party would survive that. I believe in the party, and I believe in what the party can be and what the party can stand for, and I'm not ready to give that up. Those of us who believe in Republican principles and ideals have a responsibility to try to lead the party back to what it can be, and to reject so much of the toxin and the vitriol.
We will stop the steal. We won this election, and we won it by a landslide. This was not a close election.
That millions of people, millions of Republicans, have been betrayed by Donald Trump, and that is a really painful thing for people to recognize and to admit. But it's absolutely the case, and they've been betrayed by him, by the big lie, and by what he continues to do and say to tear apart our country and tear apart our party. And I think we have to reject that.
So do you run for president? Do you see yourself running for president as a way to prevent what you say would be the destruction of the party, ultimately damaging our country?
I haven't made a decision about that yet. And I'm obviously very focused on my reelection. I'm very focused on the January 6th committee. I'm very focused on my obligations to do the job that I have now. And I'll make a decision about 24 down the road. But I think about it less in terms of a decision about running for office and more in terms of, as an American and as somebody who's in a position of public trust now, how do I make sure that I'm doing everything I can to do the right thing, to do what I know is right for the country, and to protect our Constitution.
It is Monday, the 4th of July of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. It's a holiday weekend, and we already have leftovers. And we haven't even had the big barbecue day, which is supposed to be today. Well, how is your Independence Day? Kind of a memory, isn't it? Remember when we were independent? Oh, boy, it was great to celebrate Independence Day. In fact, what's so neat about celebrating it now is that it was such a grand time to be so, and we need to remember that. Yes. Well, some of us were freer than others, but now we're all equal in our unfreedom. I guess all of us are equal. There's a small minority that are more equal. Yes, it's the barnyard, as foretold by our friend Orwell. Some people had Mr. Rogers. We had Orwell. Sit on his knee. He was a smoker, too. Smelled. Did you know that? Yeah. Poor guy. If only people knew what that weed did to them. Oh, my God. Speaking of which, apparently over in Britain, they're having an issue, or I don't know if it's actually Britain, but a British journalist apparently maybe writing for a Fox-affiliated journal, maybe the Wall Street Journal. I'm trying to remember who she's writing for, but nonetheless, she was purporting that there's some sort of malady, and some of our friends here at Netroots Radio have informed me that they know somebody who's actually had this nauseated feeling where they threw up their guts. They vomited their guts out in hyperbolic sentiment. And that was after ostensibly smoking some potent pot. Now, I sometimes wonder if there was something other than the pot that they were ingesting that caused them to get sick, because one can also choke on the smoke and maybe cause a gag reflex. But there are no properties in pot to cause people to be nauseated. I'm sorry. This has all been settled long ago. There's no mystery about this. We know how pot works on the body, and we know how alcohol does. And the physical manifestations of dizziness doesn't occur on pot. It doesn't affect that part of the brain. Your balance is not disrupted. The amount of time that it takes stimuli to come through the eye and for the brain to react to that is a fraction of a second. I think it's like 3/8 of a second. That is not diminished, whereas in alcohol it is. Now, this is all settled. It was settled long ago. This is the science. The science was suppressed for a long time, decades. Couldn't study it here in this country, but the study still kept going on elsewhere. And some of us had our own, well, shall we say, private studies. Private research, yes. Self-funded in many cases. Though it would have been nice to be funded to do the research, some of us felt that it was such a noble cause that we had to research it ourselves. And we did our own research. Peer-reviewed, too. Yeah. When you're sitting among a bunch of peers, you can actually determine what the hell is going on, can you? So, apparently there's some sort of malady that this woman says doctors have been telling her. Well, what doctors? I'd like to know these doctors, and I'd like to figure out what it is they think in pot is causing the nauseated feeling of, I don't know, hacking up your guts. I think maybe sometimes people are mistaking maybe taking the smoke too much. Now, of course, in edibles, you won't have that gag reflex because there's no smoke involved. So, that said, it's a lot of reefer madness. And I will tell you that when there have been peer-reviewed studies recently, since Oregon has had its legalized pot policies, the use of legal and illegal opioids has decreased dramatically. So I think these recent upwellings of reefer madness propaganda is because the Sacklers have been losing money. They not only got hit big on the settlements, which actually are still up in the air. They'll probably never pay a dime because they're the Sacklers. But where they are really hurting is in the actual raw buying of these opioids because of legalized pot, and they got to get rid of legalized pot so they can start making money again. Yeah, God damn the pusher man. Jeez. Also, there's no such thing as pot poisoning. There's no such thing as pot addiction. Once again, the properties of the pot don't have the elements that would cause addiction. Now, there is the idea of psychological addiction, yes. Some people they're addicted to TV. But there's not an actual property in the television that causes you to be addicted. That's you. Okay? So when you stop taking pot, you don't have withdrawals. Oh, maybe you want to get some more pot. But they are not scientifically classified as withdrawal symptoms. Once again, this is the science that was settled quite a while ago. And if you're trying to tell me that there was no potent pot back in the day, I got, I don't know, I got a Brooklyn Bridge to sell you? Do I? Because there was certainly potent pot back in the day. It was a little scattershot. You never knew when you were going to get it. It was all the same price, generally, until they started... Actually, what they started doing is they used to take Acapulco Gold and tie it around a stick, and then they call that tie stick. Oh, yeah, this comes from tie stick. Well, Acapulco Gold was actually pretty potent in and of itself. But it wasn't tie stick. And when you got tie stick, it was pretty potent. Yep. Afghani Red, too. Pretty potent. The only difference now is that one can test for THC levels, and whereas they didn't have the testings for THC levels back in the day, granted. But there was potent pot. Quite potent pot. Panama Red. Afghani Red. Yep. What else? Oh, Keef. Remember Keef? Yep. Pretty potent. And it was just pot pollen, essentially, you know. Yep. Pretty much. So, nonetheless, that was somewhat disconcerting, especially when the article or the thread that she was posting was rife with doctors have told me. Doctors have told me. Doctors have told me. It's all this anonymous BS. Making it up. Name some names, please. If they believe in their studies, then they can name themselves. Which brings us to the SCOTUS members who are upset because people are singing This Little Light of Mine outside their house for 30 minutes, then walking to another MAGAt SCOTUS house up the street and singing This Little Light of Mine. And apparently that is a threat to democracy and the Constitution, and it must stop now, in spite of the fact that it's their First Amendment right. And it's not outside agitators, it's their neighbors. Yep, I guess the MAGAt SCOTUS people aren't coming to the Tupperware parties anymore. Probably not. Yeah. They'll be shunned, and no one likes to be shunned. At least not to their face, and that's why they don't want anybody out there putting chalk about, loving thy neighbor. Yeah, it'd be nice if these MAGAt Christo-fascists actually followed the law of Jesus. The law? suggestion. Love thy neighbor. Well, maybe they are following it. They hate themselves as they hate their neighbors. Pretty much. Well, it is a holiday, and we did decide to put a show because it falls on a weekend or on a weekday. Where am I? Oh, personal news. My mom took a tumble Saturday night, Sunday morning. I tell her relentlessly, she's got a little yapping Yorkshire poodle type dog, Ginger, because in her younger days she was red. So I don't know, name her a pejorative from Great Britain. Yeah, it's a Ginger. But anyway, little Ginger is kind of a yapping dog, and I love her anyway. And she's getting quite old, and she needs some care. Medicine needs to be applied, needs to be put with her food, crushed up, and that kind of thing. We take some care with her. But she, because of this furosemide that the dog needs to keep water off its heart, it causes her to be dehydrated, and she drinks a lot of water, and then she has to go pee a lot of water, and that means that she needs to be let out. So I've been trying to convince my mom, the dog's not going to go out with you. She's going to come and get me anyway. So you stay in bed. The dog will come and get me, and I'll let it out. It doesn't matter what time of the morning it is. She's going to be incessant, and I'll have to get up anyway. But unfortunately, my mom takes it upon herself like, well, I don't want my son to have to get up to take the dog out. So she took the dog out the front door and somehow slipped and took a tumble, and she has very, very gossamer-like skin, and so it doesn't take much to tear the skin. So I'd been up about 15 minutes earlier than that. This happened about 10 or 2:10, and I had been up about 10 minutes before that to go to the facilities, as one wants to at this time of our life. And I have perfected this ability to get right back into REM. Not the music, but my actual rapid eye movement so that I can sleep and get rest. And so I was in that state when I heard some sort of tapping, and I opened my eyes, and my mom's door, I could see her door was open because I could see the light from her room. And, I'm like, it's not unusual for my mom to get up and do weird things like, oh, I'm going to hang some paintings, or I'm going to replace some things on the walls and put in new nails in the walls. And so I heard this tapping, and I thought, what's my mom doing at, 2:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, hanging paintings and pictures and stuff? So then I laid there a little bit, and I heard some tapping some more, and then I heard her call my first name, Roy. And I went, Mom, what's wrong? And I go to her room, and she's not in her room. I go, Mom, where are you? And she goes, I've fallen. I go, where have you fallen? She goes, out the door. So I run to the front door, and there she is. And the dog was with her. And Gunner, I got to tell you, if there's any kind of weird noise in this house, Gunner is quite the watchdog. And he can be a little scary. So, he could scare off vermin and crooks, but he made no noise. And that was the other thing, is that usually he's my alarm for those sorts of things. If Mom does some sort of weird noise in her room, he lets me know right now. So, patched her up, and like I said, she has gossamer-like skin, and it just both arms. And fortunately, she said that she thought maybe she hit her head, but didn't feel any bump. We did all of the reactionary tests, with the eye and all that, and I've been monitoring her. But there was that. So there's something to put a damper on your holiday, huh? Kind of scary, because my paternal grandmother died because she fell in her garage when we were living out of state at the time. It was just a quote, comedy of errors. Comedy. The couple that was to look after her were out of town, and the people who were supposed to take over in her stead were coming back the next day. And that's when they found my grandmother dying of hypothermia from a broken hip in the garage on cold concrete for about a day and a half. And that's how my grandmother died. Falling, breaking her hip, not being able to call, get out. I mean, this is back way before cell phones, of course. I mean, the rotary phone was on the wall in the kitchen, but she was down outside the kitchen in the garage about 6 steps. So it just kind of made me flash on that when my mom was, fortunately it's the front door. I mean, people are going to work at that time, or not that time, but, it's relatively warm nights. But still, it just freaked me out. And hold your loved ones close while you can, because life is transient. All right. Well, we do have a curated show for you here today on this holiday, 4th of July. And Liz Cheney at the top said that the J6 committee could issue multiple Trump criminal referrals. She didn't actually say multiple, but that's what she was inferring. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the White House slammed Mitch McConnell for protecting Big Pharma price gouging. Companies that help workers seeking abortions could be held criminally liable by the MAGAt Nazi states of Amerikka. And California has better beaches than Florida, better surf, better food, better due process, and better equal protection too. So vacation in California. You might even want to move there. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where 2 Russian airplanes departed Bulgaria with scores of Russian diplomats, staff, and their families amid a mass expulsion that has sent tension soaring between the historically close nations. And 32,000 Sydney, Australia residents were warned they may need to evacuate their homes after more than 3 feet of rain fell in 24 hours, and they're expecting maybe that much in the next. Oh my. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Page at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. The chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who will be at Netroots Nation in Pittsburgh this year in person. First time in a couple of years. Well, we will be taking all the precautions that one should normally take while in a pandemic still. But Kelly will be at Netroots Nation this year, so stay tuned for reportage by Kelly Lincoln from Netroots Nation on Netroots Radio. If you would look across the homepage from that chat room link, to the left, there is the link to our Patreon site. And please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Why? Well, because we need help paying our bills. I have to assure you, monies don't come in to get us to Netroots Nation. That's on our dime. But we do need help paying the ISP bills and all of the attendant service providers, and it's quite a bit running this little powerhouse of resistance. And so, yeah, we need some help doing that. We found that when we pay our bills, we get to fly under the radar and continue this resisting that we've been resisting for the last 11 years, 24/7, 365, by the way, and we have been able to do so because of your generosity. And thank you for that, and thank you for generosity in the future, because we're not giving up. Nope. This has to continue, because we will not allow this, takeover of everything dear and good that we know can be a more and better perfect union. Let's work on it together. And thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and he's pretty busy. So if he hasn't gotten back to you on DMs and stuff, just hang in there, and or get a hold of me. Either way, but Tom takes care of our Netroots Radio platform, and thank you, Tom, for doing that and everything else. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Actually, not about. It gets published 10 minutes before showtime because it's automatic. Put it in queue, hit the button, there it is. But then I will sometimes scramble to get those show notes and links linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms in that 10-minute window, sometimes after. But the show notes and links is where you can find the real reportage. So and also the complete articles. Oftentimes we have to abbreviate because of time constraints. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, really wherever podcasts can be found. And, of course, the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Okay, it's a holiday and a Monday, and I need one more cup of coffee. Don't we all? Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. You know, we're in a cafe. You think there would be coffee available. There is. It's just in another part of, the mothership. Not right here. Because we've consumed everything that we have right here. Anyway, this first offering is by Oliver Willis out of the American Independent. The White House slammed Senate Minority Leader McConnell for protecting large pharmaceutical companies in a statement released by Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. The Republican Senate leader is holding hostage a bipartisan package to strengthen American competitiveness versus China that would yield hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs in places like Southern Ohio, Idaho, and other states around the country. It would lower the cost of countless products and end our reliance on imports. Why? To protect the ability of big pharmaceutical companies to price gouge. Senate Republicans are literally choosing to help China outcompete the U.S. in order to protect big drug companies. This takes loyalty to special interest over working Americans to a new and shocking height. We are not going to back down in the face of this outrageous threat, the press secretary said. The White House's statement came after McConnell announced his intention to hold up passage of the United States Innovation and Competition Act, currently under consideration by Congress. McConnell's statement came following reports last Wednesday that Democratic senators have finalized the details of efforts to lower prescription drug prices as part of a larger economic package. Let me be perfectly clear. There will be no bipartisan USICA as long as Democrats are pursuing a partisan reconciliation bill. The Grim Reaper of the graveyard at Congress said he wrote that in a statement. The Senate and House of Representatives are currently working on a compromise bill, which President Joe Biden has indicated he wishes to sign into law as soon as possible. The proposal, which is an effort to pass some provisions of the Build Back Better legislation that previously failed to make it through the Senate because that's Joe Biden's fault, apparently, would allow the government to negotiate drug prices on behalf of Medicare recipients, but the repugs don't want that. If the proposal becomes law, drug prices would begin being negotiated in 2023. And drug costs for seniors under Medicare would be capped at $2,000 per year. But that's not enough for the pusher man. Taylor Telford of the Washington Post brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Independence Day River City Hash Mondays. Dozens of American companies, big and small, are offering to cover travel costs for employees seeking abortions despite an array of potential legal and financial risks. As Republican-led state legislatures and national anti-abortion groups advance plans to stop people in states where abortion is banned from seeking the procedure elsewhere, corporations could find themselves or their employees criminally liable for helping to procure an abortion, experts say, and companies' ability to provide abortion travel coverage to their employees will vary widely by location and the type of health plan they offer. Still, companies are forging ahead. Companies have apparently taken a stance that they are willing to shoulder that risk to send signals of support to their employees and the market, said Meredith Christenbaum, an employee or an employment attorney at Kohlberg Cohn in Chicago. More than 80 companies, from household names such as Netflix, Target, Disney, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Procter & Gamble, to smaller firms across tech, media, and retail, have taken action in response to abortion bans. Many have said their health plans will cover medical travel for care not available near employees' homes, including abortions. Patagonia offered to cover legal costs for employees arrested while peacefully protesting. Lyft and Parade are donating to abortion funds and other organizations dealing in reproductive health care. Corporate rules of engagement on social issues have shifted dramatically in the past few years amid public pressure on companies to take stands on everything from police brutality and racism to climate change and voting rights. The fallout from the end of Roe v. Wade is forcing corporations to redefine their vision for social responsibility yet again. This time, corporations have largely avoided the sort of impassioned letters to employees and stakeholders that they usually put out while weighing in on social issues. Instead, some companies move swiftly to expand their healthcare plans despite the uncharted territories. The movement to offer travel reimbursement is especially striking given the polarization around abortion. Jake Tinney, assistant professor of marketing at Northwestern University, who said most of the companies that have taken strong stances target consumers that are already aligned with their social issues. Other companies have expressed support for their employees, but not outright opposition to the ruling, Tinney said. He pointed out that Lyft and Nike both stopped posting on Twitter in the days leading up to and following the Supreme Court decision, despite covering abortion travel costs for their workers. And the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Governor Gavin Newsom is running for re-election in California, but his latest television ad is airing in Florida. The 30-second spot, scheduled to start airing on Fox today, takes shots at Florida Governor DeSantis and his policies while drawing a contrast with California. Freedom, it's under attack in your state. Republican leaders, they're banning books, making it harder to vote, restricting speech in classrooms, even criminalizing women and doctors, Newsom says, while images of DeSantis and Trump flash on the screen. I urge all of you living in Florida to join the fight, or join us in California, where we still believe in freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom to choose, freedom from hate, and the freedom to love, Newsom says. Newsom has said he has no interest in running for president, but the ad is sure to stroke speculation that the 54-year-old Democrat is eyeing national office. DeSantis is a potential 2024 GOP candidate for the White House. Newsom handily beat back a recall attempt last year and is expected to cruise to re-election in November. Indeed. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Gabby Nicole. This week, back in the building. Baz Luhrmann's Elvis takes you on a carnival ride through not only Elvis Presley's life, but that of his controversial manager, Colonel Tom Parker. An argument could be made for calling the film The Colonel, given the presence of Tom Hanks' character in the film. If Elvis is the Earth, Parker is the Moon, narrating the action and stealthily looming as the film progresses. Austin Butler's performance as Elvis is honestly impressive, especially considering he's from the Disney Channel School of Acting. He brings the king down to a human level, or at least as human as Elvis Presley can seem. On the other hand, Hanks' Colonel Parker is cartoonish. Between the fat suit, the cosmetic jowls, nose, and the carny speak, Parker seemed more like the Penguin. Other support mostly fades into the background, as they're overshadowed by the Colonel. The film has a bit of an identity crisis on how it portrays race, specifically how Elvis and African Americans interacted musically and culturally. Elvis was not racist, but this film's handling of race could be seen as leaning that way. The black characters, including B.B. King, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Little Richard, and other successful black artists, serve as props for Elvis. The film is about Elvis, but their positive interactions seem like mere references in the Book of Elvis. Black music is depicted as raw, primal, and sweaty, and Elvis as a white savior, which he was in some respects, but in a way explored not nearly enough. Some postscript could have helped with this issue. On leaving the theater, an employee asked if I liked the film. I said that if you like Elvis, this is the movie for you. Elvis may be the film for reminiscing fans, but not for musical and racial context, or a particularly nuanced performance from Hanks. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Gabby Nicole. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. They say you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. But what if you had access to a remote-controlled carnivorous plant? Because researchers have engineered a bio-inspired system, an artificial neuron, if you will, that can trigger the snap of a Venus flytrap.
Hi, my name is Simone Fabiano, an associate professor at Linköping University in Sweden.
Fabiano designed the trap-springing device using nerve cells as a kind of bio-based blueprint.
The way our biological neurons work is that they integrate information from different input over time, perform computation, and communicate the results to other neurons by means of voltage pulses.
Now, standard silicone-based systems can also deliver electrical pulses, but if you want to couple them with something living to produce bionic prosthetics or engineer any kind of brain-machine interface, well, they suffer from several limitations.
Such as rigidity, poor biocompatibility, complex circuit structures, and operation mechanisms that are fundamentally different from those of biological systems.
To smooth biological integration, Fabiano built his system from polymers that conduct both electrons, like everyday electronics, and ions, which is how neurons get things done. It's the ions that
enable communication between biological and artificial neurons.
Each part of the artificial neuron, which the researchers describe in the journal Nature, has a direct counterpart in its biological role model.
We have an input terminal that acts as the biological neuron's dendrite.
That dendrite collects the incoming electrical signals and sends them to a capacitor, which, like a neuronal cell body, integrates the information. Then, once the voltage reaches a specific threshold, a pulse is fired along organic amplifiers that mimic a nerve cell axon.
We use the ionic concentration-dependent switching characteristics of our transistors to modulate the frequency of spiking, which is to a large extent analogous to biological systems.
So, the ions control the current that flows from the faux neuron to its target, in this case a live Venus flytrap, triggering the rapid-fire closure of its leafy appendages. All in all, a dramatic demonstration of the potential of neuromorphic design that should give interested engineers and interloping fruit flies something to watch out for. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Donald Trump's criminal attempt to steal the 2020 election failed. But it's not the only recent coup attack on our democracy. In the last few years, a cabal of right-wing zealots have plotted to seize control of the U.S. Supreme Court. By hook and crook, they've installed a 6-judge majority, and now they're using them as a political cudgel to try stealing not just a constitutional right, but an inherent human right from American women, the right to make their own reproductive decisions. By judicial fiat, the right-wing judges have decreed that the state will make birth decisions regardless of what mothers want. This is the Republican Party's current concept of small government. When the Supremes issued their government decree in June, headlines blared that the decision by, quote, conservatives on the court, quote, ends a woman's right to choose. That's wrong on 2 counts. First, there is nothing conservative about what amounts to a naked power grab by a small minority of pious ideological tyrants. Second, a human right cannot be ended. The judicial authoritarians who are perverting the court's purpose from justice to autocracy are deluding themselves if they think that 6 unelected judges ensconced in a marble bubble in Washington can deter the democratic imperative, much less the maternal authority, of millions of American women. Reality has many ways to conquer ideology. To be blunt, the right wing lost this fight the moment it won the ruling. Unfortunately, even the Biden White House doesn't get the depth of the public's outrage and determination to restore this right into law. Asked about rising anger at his inaction, Biden dismissed the critics. "I'm the only president they got," he snapped. This is Jim Hightower saying Joe might want to reflect on the vibrant history of American democracy. If leaders don't lead, the people will, even if that means getting a new president. Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chat-and-chew.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Do you consider the right to join and form a union of your choosing a fundamental right? The United Nations does. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1950. On that day, the United Nations formally put into force the freedom of association and protection of the right to organize. After World War II, the United Nations sought to outline the principles that it hoped would build a more just, safe, and equitable world. The International Labor Organization played a key role in that process through its affiliation with the United Nations. It was the first specialized organization to be recognized as part of the United Nations. After their convention in 1948, the International Labor Organization affirmed their commitment to workers' rights. That same year, the United Nations supported these principles as part of their Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This Declaration for Workers' Rights would become official 12 months after ratification by two nations. Norway and Sweden were those first two countries to do so. And today in labor history, this important international declaration went into full force. The United Nations Declaration read, "Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association." It went on to even more specifically guarantee workers' rights, stating clearly, everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of his interests. Today, the International Labor Organization continues to coordinate international efforts to address child labor, the plight of migrant workers, and many more issues of workplace health and safety. It is one of the main collectors of international labor statistics around the world. We should all be dedicated to this simple truth. Union rights are human rights.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 64 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only about 77. Which is a little bit cooler than what we had yesterday, which was around 85. So we'll have a bit cooler days till the middle and end of the week, and then we'll slowly inch upwards. Partly to mostly cloudy today with winds out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Small chance of rain today, small chance of rain tonight. We had a little bit dropping overnight, but not enough to, make anything wet this morning. Mostly cloudy tonight with lows around 60. Winds will be light and variable. Then cloudy skies tomorrow with highs once again about 77. Winds out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Now, we know that confirmed cases of coronavirus have not been updated since Friday, and it looks like the state is now going to only be releasing these once a week. And they had been daily, even though hospitalizations are increasing. Nonetheless, we stand at 466,049 confirmed cases, and the deceased is at 554. Grass pollen is rated high outside the window here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 26 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is very high at level 9. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.94 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 72%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 80 and sunny. Rome is 98 and fair with a heat advisory that could also impact critical electrical infrastructure. Kyiv is 88 and fair. Kabul is 81 and clear. Hong Kong is 83 with a light rain shower. Tokyo is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees with rain and wind, and we have a story coming up about that here at the chef's table, so stay tuned. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and cloudy, and New York is 82 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Valentina Petrova and Stefan McGrath of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 2 Russian airplanes departed Bulgaria yesterday, Sunday, with scores of Russian diplomatic staff and their families amid a mass expulsion that has sent tension soaring between the historically close nations, a Russian diplomat said. Philippe Voskarensky, a high-ranking Russian diplomat, told journalists at the airport in Bulgaria's capital, Sofia, before the flights left, that he was among the 70 Russian diplomatic staff declared persona non grata last week and ordered to leave the country by the end of yesterday. Bulgaria's expulsion decision was announced by acting Prime Minister Kirill Petkov, who took a strong stance against Russia after it invaded Ukraine. Petkov, who lost a no-confidence vote on June 22nd, has claimed Moscow used hybrid war tactics to bring down his government. Petkov said that Russia will retain 43 of its employees after the expulsion and noted that Bulgaria has just 12 diplomatic staff in Moscow.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. More than 30,000 residents of Sydney and its surrounds were told to evacuate or prepare to abandon their homes as Australia's largest city faces its 4th and possibly worst round of flooding in less than a year and a half. Days of torrential rain caused dams to overflow and waterways to break their banks, bringing a new flood emergency to parts of the city of 5 million people. The current flooding might affect areas that were spared during the previous floods in March this year, and April. New South Wales State Premier Dominic Perrottet said 32,000 people were impacted by evacuations and warnings. Emergency services made numerous flood rescues yesterday, Sunday, and early today, and were getting hundreds more calls for help. Australia's Bureau of Meteorology said some areas between Newcastle, north of Sydney, and Wollongong, south of Sydney, had received more than 39 inches of rain the previous 24 hours, where some have received more than 59 inches. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.